Quite a while ago now, Wargaming introduced a premium vehicle at tier 7 that was outrageously good and 100% better than the Tech Tree equivalent. And of course, in today's video we are looking at the Tiger 131 and the kind of beginning, or one of the first console exclusive Power Creep premium pay to win vehicles in the game. And of course that's because this tank is essentially a Tiger 1, but better if you decide to fire premium rounds, which, because it's a premium tank, you're able to do without costing you anything. And in fact, by firing premium rounds, you actually end up making more money because you're able to pen a lot more things. But that's because the standard rounds of this tank are pretty poor. You're looking at only 160 in the region of 160, but with the premium rounds you got 220 somewhere in that region. So you're more than capable of being able to pen and punish most tanks that you come up against. Remember, this is a tier 7, so you can come up against tier 9s. Probably the hardest tank to pen, maybe, I mean, debatably, is something like a Malshan, because you just don't have the sheer values of penetration that maybe you'd need, but that doesn't really matter a whole deal when you're basically out DPMing every single tank in the game, because this also has one of the highest damage per minutes of any of these vehicles that you've seen recently, I expect, and that's because it deals 240 alpha damage every 4 seconds as a heavy tank, which therefore out reloads most medium tanks in the game, definitely out reloads most light tanks in the game, and of course definitely has more DPM than any tier 7 medium tank, even if they were to have something like the Comet's gun, which is 150 alpha, but yeah, reloads slightly quicker maybe, potentially, but yeah, just doesn't have the alpha damage, which is why as a heavy tank this is just despicable, and why I find this tank very, very horrible for anyone to come up against, especially if you're a lower tier vehicle, because it just rinses you your hit points in no time at all. So I believe in the region of about 3,000 damage per minute on a tier 7 heavy being the kind of imperative here. And this replay is going to showcase, like, you know, where everything seems to go pretty well, you know, nothing went outstandingly amazing and we somehow came up against like the worst team in the world. Granted, the T-34-100 in front of us maybe stayed in front of us for a little bit too long without going back down the hill, but we're not going to complain since we can kind of push forward. Now I'm debating whether to just sit here against the T-29. I decided I don't really want to take the extra 300 because it's not a guaranteed win at the moment. So I pull back down the hill. Maybe we can take advantage of him later on. But as we kind of decide what we want to do, we look up to the top right where we've got 3,110 damage, so more than enough to kind of make this a very good game. But it doesn't stop here, as we kind of find a load more vehicles within the game, and of course there is like 8 tanks left on the enemy team for us to farm, which hopefully we'll be able to do. The T-29 luckily misses us, but he does decide he's now going to come up on the ridgeline, so we aim for the lower tracks. Unfortunately don't manage to pen it, but now it's just a case of trying to find this AMX 1375, which is tier 7 French kind of light tank. The T-29 does inevitably hit us, so I knew that was probably going to be the case, but it doesn't really matter because now we can farm the Panzer V4 before the T-29 is ever going to be able to reload. And remember, this tank can fire almost 3 rounds for every single T-29 hit that you might receive, meaning you can do 600 damage and the T-29 can do 320 back to you. So yeah, is that balanced in terms of being a heavy tank? Well, I don't think so, but nevertheless, we can kind of push forward and decide what we want to do. I know the T-29 is potentially looking at me, same with the artillery piece, because we all know what artillery and Tigers are like. Of course, this tank doesn't have the best armour in the game. I'm not going to BS you and try and say, you know what, this has such great armour, it's an overpowered armour. No, it's terrible. Most tanks will be able to pen you, but in doing so they're going to receive a ton of hit points, and it's not going to be worth it for them to do that. Of course, when you're dealing 4,000 damage in a tier 7 game, yeah, it showcases how powerful and how strong this tank can be. We now fully aim on the side of the T29, of course don't manage to pen when you want to, he then just continues going out, so we just finish him off quite easily, and then it's just a case of hunting down the last opponents in the game. There is a Leopard on the enemy team who's kind of pushing towards our tank destroyer. I'm not entirely sure if he's going to finish him off. It looks like our tank destroyer is pretty much fine. We then try and auto aim him. You know, in the game you should always try and aim if you can, because yeah, you get unlucky. We do get unlucky there by auto-aiming, but yeah, it wouldn't have really mattered because I knew our player was going to take him out. But he's gone. Enemy artillery decides he's going to focus the Tiger. Don't blame him. Big hit points, or big chunky amount of hit points and very low armour for an artillery piece to farm. But at this point it's just a case of trying to find this Panzer V4, of course the most broken tier 5 heavy, medium tank destroyer artillery piece that's in the game, as in the Panzer V4, and coming up against this one, which is just a better version, maybe not tier for tier, definitely not as good, but yeah, a really good one, and definitely one of the most kind of OP premiums, and I can say overpowered in this one. This really is a overpowered premium in the hands of someone that knows what to do with damage per minute and maybe doesn't have to rely on any armour. And even though this tank can bounce a few rounds from lower tier vehicles, it's probably unlikely. But you see the Panzer V4 here now pushing forward, and we get the final enemy out of this game, having picked up 4,581 damage in this tier 7 heavy tank. So yeah, really good result. Of course, 2,181 base experience, 6 kills, and it was a gift from Fat Little Bernie, who decided to gift us this tank within the game, so really big thumbs up from you. And of course, let's jump into another replay where maybe you see something slightly different in this tank, but maybe just a bit of a troll gameplay, I guess. So as we mentioned, I did say about it being a troll game, and it's not because it was outstandingly great. I mean, we had a good result. We managed to get a fairly decent amount of damage for a tier 7, but it was more about the fact that you can get away with things that you're going to see in this replay that maybe some other vehicles wouldn't be able to do at this tier. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting one, and I was surprised I made it as far as I did in this. I guess that spoils it a little bit because we do end up getting taken out, for those of you that didn't pick up on that. But yeah, it's an interesting one. But one of the things that we haven't talked about in this video so far is that the Tiger 131, as with all of the Tigers, isn't the slowest of vehicles in the game. You can see on the flat, when you're kind of not having to go up any hills, you're looking at about 35 to 40 kilometers an hour, which for a heavy tank is not that slow. And I mean, considering it's not really a heavy tank in the traditional sense that, you know, the armour doesn't really hold up as a heavy tank, or at least doesn't really have effective armour. It might have the values of armour that you'd expect from a heavy, but most things will be able to pen you. Even at tier 5, a lot of the premiums will be able to pen you, and the tech tree tanks with premium ammunition will also be able to pen you, most likely, if they know the weak points, which are essentially all of the flat bits of the front of the Tiger, which is pretty much the whole thing. So you get my drift, you're not going to be bouncing anything. Now this gameplay in particular, we see us move forward on Dukla Pass, and this is a map I actually really do enjoy. I think it's got a little bit of everything for everyone. There's definitely some occasions where maybe the team go in the complete wrong area, which is this game. You know, C and D, 7 and 8 are not particularly the best area for heavy tanks to be sat around camping, considering the fact that most mediums on the enemy team will probably push to D4, knowing that they haven't actually been spotted by any of the medium tanks, who for some reason are over on this side. Yeah, it's like a role reversal, this game, from where people probably should be. Now there's a Goronich or a Minotaur, you know, the premium, like, overpowered version of the Goronich, which is the KV5, which can meet tier 10s instead of the preferential matchmaking version. I believe the Minotaur gets slightly higher penetration, which means Yes, it's not particularly very fun for us to come up against him because he's going to be able to pen us every single day of the week, much like every other tank in the game, but yeah, very much a doubting that I'd ever be able to bounce around from the Minotaur. And of course, we've come up against quite a few of the enemy team on this flank, which is it's not particularly great when you've got a medium and a tank destroyer on your team backing up on the heavy corner of the map. Now we do get spotted somehow. I'm assuming it's a light tank or a medium or someone that's straight ahead. You see me lock my turret as I'm pulling back and looking over to the left. The Minotaur is indeed pushing up quite rapidly, and we're trying to just retrack him or track him or just do something. But I realise, you know what, the actual penetration of this tank is just terrible, so we are taking a hit that we maybe didn't need within this game, but at least he didn't focus our teammate, because at the end of the day sometimes you do even need a teammate just to keep their guns in the fight so that they can help you out later on. Granted, you should never rely on your teammates to do that, but it definitely helps to have some in the game if you do need to. Now, we pump the IKV in the side, and then the Minotaur decides he's just going to YOLO, which is not a good idea when you've got a heavy tank that deals 200 in your side every single 4 seconds, or when using combat rations 3.6 seconds. And yeah, he's very quickly being removed from the game as we're just pumping him for 200 damage every single time. And now with the IKV on this flank, it's time to kind of remove him, and you see me here going for the tracking shot on the IKV. Looks like he doesn't have a repair kit, and I guess that's good night for him because yeah, not particularly the greatest. Now Jagdpanther here. This is the boy that we were on about, and the trollness that we saw. Now you're seeing me just try and get a shot into the tracks to keep him in place, and it's kind of like watching old people, if you know what I mean, doing the business. And he misses. Of course, he does have the 490 alpha damage shot from the in the J-Panther. And of course we're just trying to retrack him here. Not looking like it's going to happen. Is he going to hit us? Looks like he may do. Don't know what he's doing, but he misses the back of us somehow. And of course we are now just trying to deal some damage. Now for some reason the tank in front of us, which I believe is the 53 TP, does indeed actually bounce off the front. And of course now he's decided to either fire HE or with the big gun, or he's got the smaller gun on the tank, and we try and get out of the way, but we don't manage to do it. But somehow we took out the J-Panther from full health when we were a one-shot, and he had multiple opportunities to take us out. But I guess that shows you the kind of playstyle that you can get away with in the Tiger 131, because ultimately we did not play that well in terms of like the positioning that we were in against tanks that should definitely have taken us out, but somehow we managed to actually come away with a win. Granted, we did bounce a few rounds that we probably shouldn't have from the J-Panther in the side, that if he just aimed correctly probably would have penned me every single time, but there we go. Overall, the Tiger 131 is definitely, from my opinion, deemed overpowered, and one of the tanks that if you really want an OP tier 7 and not to really have to think about much, then the Tiger 131 is probably for you, and maybe you want to pick it up in the future if it ever comes on sale. Other than that, I really did appreciate you watching this video, and if you want to check out any other videos much like this one, we have, of course, as always, got the gameplay and tank reviews playlist with all of the videos that we've done on all of the different tanks in the game. There must be hundreds of different tanks within the game that we've reviewed at this point, and on the left hand side, just the most recent gameplay that we've had on the channel. Thank you, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. Goodbye.